going on, everybody? Welcome back into another edition of the Behind the Mic podcast, where we peel back the curtain into the sports media industry, find out all about the people inside it, what they do, and what makes them tick. For episode 11, I am joined by another very special guest, someone who has blown up on the Celtics beat this year. A really cool story. If you don't know who she is, I'm sure you will soon. It's Noa Dalzell from CelticsBlog, covering the Celtics. She also does some WNBA coverage as well, and does some audio video with CLNS Media. So before we get into it, Noah, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it. And thanks for coming on. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, of course. So I like to start these off with giving the floor to the guest in a segment called Resume Time. So basically, if you could just take us through how you got to where you're at CelticsBlog. And I want to kind of preface it with the story you just wrote last week after the Celtics won the championship, where it is your first season on the beat, but you also you applied to a job when you were like 10 years old. So I want to kind of, if you can, incorporate that as well, because I think your story is so fascinating with how you've sort of grown and blown up over the last year. So the floor is yours to take us through your resume.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a kind of a weird story. So I always say this is my first year doing this, getting paid to do it.
Okay.
But I feel like I've been preparing for this job my whole life, like literally every day. So I grew up playing basketball. My dad played overseas for like 15 years. So, I always say like we were not a religious family, but if we had to have a religion, it probably would have been basketball. Yeah. And so I watched the Celtics and watched the NBA from a really young age. And when I say watch, I don't mean like I watched the game, like the game was on in the background. I mean like I was like locked in, didn't miss a regular season game, preseason game, knew everything there was possibly to know. Like I remember my mom was like, "What is going on? This is so weird." But that's just the way that I was. And then was like that kind of through my childhood. And I think when I was 10 is when I was like, I think I want to do this as my job. And you obviously don't know much about like the struggles of the sports journalism industry, but as I got older, I learned more about them, and I kind of got turned off from trying to pursue this full time. I wrote in my story about the kind of covering the championship as I saw a job listing when I was 13 for a Bleacher Report role that was like a general NBA writer. And I vividly remember reading all the qualifications and thinking, oh, I'd be perfect for this job. Like I truly remember that. Yeah. And it's funny because I know there's a statistic or like there's a common knowledge, I guess, that there's a lot of research that's shown that women, when they look at a job listing, if they only hit like one, they hit everything except for one qualification, they won't apply. And then men, if they hit just a few out of like the 20, they will apply. Like that's something that I've read and learned about like in my career classes at school and things. And I definitely did not get that instinct because I don't think I hit any of the qualifications, but I was like, I'm going to be good at this job. So I applied. Obviously I didn't get it. I was in 8th grade. And kind of went on. I ran like my sports paper in high school, and did a lot of sports coverage for all different sports. Although I'll be the first to admit I have zero interest in covering any other sport outside of basketball, which I know only limits you a little bit in this space, but that's the truth. So I can't lie about it. And so, I did a lot of sports journalism, covered like town things, it was like the Brookline tab, like wicked local writer. And then talked to people in the industry, honestly, when I was deciding what to study in college, and everybody told me not to study sports journalism. And everybody said, this is a really brutal field. You have to be ready to be laid off a bunch of times, and you have to be ready to not make a lot of money and write obituaries for 5 years before you can do the stuff you want to do. And so I did not major in journalism, and I ended up going and I studied political science, and I took some journalism classes in high school, and I wrote for the school paper, and I still kept that muscle alive. But I wasn't going to pursue it professionally. And I will say my high school journalism program was very unique. I grew up in Brookline. And I would liken it to a college journalism program. Like when I now talk to other reporters who share what they learned at Syracuse, I'm like, I learned all that in high school. And I know that sounds kind of wild, but we had two full-time teachers just for journalism in high school. And then we had 60 kids that were on the paper, and it was a full-time class. So it wasn't like just a club. It was, you would go and it would be part of your grades, part of your, so I learned everything about writing and about journalism. And so, then after college, I worked for a couple nonprofits. I'm now a climate lobbyist. I work on specifically on alternative protein. So it's trying to reduce the emissions from the animal agriculture industry. I've been vegan my whole life, or a vegetarian my whole life. So it's been kind of aligned with a lot of my other interests. And then, last summer I saw that CelticsBlog, which is one of the sites that I was an avid consumer of, and there are a bunch of those because I'm a huge consumer of like NBA Celtics media.
Mm-hmm.
I saw that they were hiring a writer, and it seemed like a really low key thing. And I figured, I've been writing about a lot of things for a long time, but definitely about basketball. And I also, like, my dad and I will literally have a phone call after every Celtics game where we debrief the game as though we're out doing a podcast, and it's just for no audience.
Yeah, right.
And I thought, I feel like I could do this, and I applied and got the job. And at first it was like you have to write 2 articles a week. You don't go to anything. Like it's very like it's like a blogger position. But then I kind of made the most out of that. And then next thing you know, I was at all the games and I was doing a bunch of work for other outlets, and so it kind of blew up from there. But it started off as just like I remember I saw the listing and I was like, okay, let me try this again. I hadn't applied for a journalism job since I was 13, but maybe
that's incredible.
So
it's really cool, and I want to get into it again because I kind of used the buzzword skyrocket and climbing because it really has. It's been insane to watch like how fast you've grown in the space, and topping it off with the championship is obviously like incredible. But you mentioned working political science, policy, climate activists. Like, what is that like? Trying to juggle 2 jobs at once, because I feel like a lot of people start that way. I did it myself. I used to work in marketing for at Boston University. I worked in sports media part-time and then kind of made the jump. And now you mentioned it too, like getting laid off and the struggle. Like that's kind of what I'm going through right now. And it's not about me. I'm just kind of saying that like, what's the struggle and the juggle like trying to do 2 things at once, especially you were on the Celtics beat at the finals games, traveling. Like, what has that been like for the last year for you?
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is for some reason, I've been in this position like my whole life where I'm juggling like a bunch of things. I think maybe like subconsciously I do like it, and I gravitate towards it. That it's not a coincidence this keeps happening. But I worked full time through my last 3 years of college at my climate job. So I did an internship there, and then basically stayed on full time and just did classes at night and online at Northeastern where I was going to school. And so that was a lot too, like being a full-time student and a full-time employee at a company that was like a startup where I became a director, and there was just like a lot going on. And so this muscle of being like, I'm just trying to stay afloat is something that I'm used to.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that I don't think it's sustainable long-term to do this the way that I did it this past year, but pretty much, like, I mean, anybody that knows me would tell you all I've done in the last year is lobby for alternative proteins and cover the Celtics and like once in a while something else. But really, it's just been those 2 things. And so, to me, the Celtics thing doesn't feel like work whatsoever. It hasn't felt like work for 1 minute. I'm sure that'll change eventually when you're doing it longer and when they're not winning the championship. Like, I'm sure if I covered the Pistons and, maybe would have started feeling like work at a certain point. Like, you don't want to go to another game. But this year it was like, to me, to be able to go to games for free, like I just felt like I was doing the thing that I love the most in the world, like 4 nights a week. So, I had no complaints. From maybe like a sleep standpoint, it was a little tough. And the finals is where it kind of like, I started feeling like, okay, I kind of need this to wrap up soon, because just all the media availabilities, like not just the games, but then all the off days, there's things. And then I don't want to like take it easy during the finals, because this is like the best opportunity for coverage. So I started like my YouTube show. I was just like, I'm doing so much. And so that the finals, had they lasted any longer, I would probably be in a tough spot, but everything wrapped up. Now it's summer. So I'm in a better position. But yeah, I think I've always worked multiple jobs or like been a school student and worked. So it wasn't like a huge departure for me.
So your coverage over the last year has been really like it just blew up, and I noticed it. I really noticed it with your Twitter coverage, and knowing some of the people that you work with, like Terp, who I used to work with at EEI, and that sort of younger group of like Celtics beat writers. But again, it's your first season on the beat, so and again, it blew up. It's like I feel like every tweet you have has like 1,000 likes. Like it's just, and it's really cool to see, because being a younger Patriots reporter, it's kind of turned into like a social media job as much as it is like a covering the sport job. So I want to get into that in a second, but just as far as like, the Twitter following, people know who you are. Like I saw you and Cam covering the parade, and like people were going up to you guys, and it's like, this is your first season on the beat. So have you gotten a chance to step back and kind of realize like, what happened, and what has this again, what has you blowing up as like one of the top Celtics reporters even felt like over the last season?
Yeah, well, first of all, I appreciate the kind words.
Yeah.
It's definitely been really strange, because so up until if you had done this a week ago, and I know we were trying to get this out earlier, I would have had a different perspective on it because
Okay.
I would have been like the Twitter thing is just I think I learned what my voice was and how I wanted to talk about the Celtics, and I just leaned into it, and I will never stray from it. And I think that's why I might have a hard time like making money in this space because I don't think I can ever do the thing where you try to find like a negative story because that's what sells or like I don't think I would be able to compromise on how I want to cover basketball and particularly the Celtics and particularly like I felt like this year looking for negative storylines is like
Well, it's impossible because they
there
were
aren't
one of
any.
the
Yeah,
best
like
teams ever,
they're
right?
historically good and they're all like nice and not controversial. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think I leaned into what my voice was. Then I also just learned about Twitter a bit, like what people like, what people don't like.
Yeah.
Like and again, people always say like, oh, well, how did you get so many followers and things? I also do a lot of things that like made that happen. Like during the game, when everybody else is like writing their stories, like I'm just tweeting and I'm
Yeah,
tweeting.
right.
I'm live tweeting the entire game. I'm zooming onto the bench because I know people like want that angle of what am I not seeing on the TV, right?
Right.
So like that's what I started doing. And then now at 1 o'clock in the morning when everybody else is done with their articles, like I'm just opening my laptop, right? So
Yeah.
it comes at a cost, but I think I just realized like if I'm going to be at the games, I don't want to just cover it as though I'm home. Like what's the difference between me being home and me being at the game? So I want to
Definitely.
utilize the fact that I can do those things. So I think I learned some tricks. I never had a Twitter before this year, so I never even really been on Twitter much. I think maybe last playoff run I just started going on like not through an account, but just checking out like
Yeah.
I was just curious how it worked. But I realized that it adds it's like for a lot of people it's part of their Celtics experience is they watch the game when they go on Twitter, right? So how can I enhance that experience for them if I'm at the game, right? Which I view being at the games as like the greatest privilege in the world because I've spent so much money going to Celtics games in my life that being able to go for free, I want to give everybody as much of access or experience as I can. The part about blowing up is weird because a week ago I would have told you, it's just Twitter followers that they like the videos I post and things. And then I went to a couple events this week, like post championship, like the Canes event, and like there was a bunch of the signatures on Sunday that like Derek White and Al Horford were doing at Dick's Sporting Goods, and then the parade, obviously. And like so many people asked me for photos and like like autograph my basketball, and like that was so confusing to me because I was like, what do you like? Why like? What are you talking about? Like, I'm just like a person that like writes about the Celtics. And then B, it was weird because I never thought about like, how do I want to come off in these interactions? Because like, I was not like, not to say that I'm famous at all, because that's not the case.
I get what you're saying.
I'm not like I was not like a 5-year-old that was like, I want to be famous one day. Like being known is like not something that I've ever thought about even for a day. And so I was kind of thinking like, okay, I want to make sure that I come off nice. Like I don't want to come off unfriendly because the last thing I would want is someone to be like, oh, look on Twitter, she's so nice. Then I met her in real life and she like didn't even say hi to me, right? So I was kind of like realizing you have to be on like and I was just writing my article at the Dick's Sporting Goods, like in between Al Horford and Derek White's events. I was just sitting there. People were coming up to me and I was like, I had like my noise canceling headphones on. I was like, wait a second, I should take these off just in case. Like, so it was kind of weird, but obviously it's really nice. And I think for me, I've been like community is like a very important aspect of like life. And so part of what I was really missing when I was doing just my lobbying job is that I didn't feel like I was really a part of the Boston community because I'm traveling for work. I'm working from my room. I'm in the political world, but like not in a very deep way. And so to be able to go to an event and have people come up to me and like I can talk to them and I feel like I'm part of like the Boston community, it's an awesome feeling. I just hope that I'm not letting them down. I was like, how can I make sure that like they like me in person the same way that they do online? But yeah, it's been a crazy week, I would say, because it really was just the last week where I realized that this had happened.
That is wild. Again, those videos that you and Cam were posting, it's like people just going up to you guys. It's like that's super cool. And it feels I guess it feels a little different because again, like you mentioned, the Celtics were so good. It's hard to find negative stories. I was talking with Dan Roach last week on the show, and he was just saying like that's kind of the way he's covered the Boston sports scene too. Like he doesn't like to find the negative stories. You're better off building relationships with players and things like that if you just kind of cover them how they want to do it. And sometimes people look at that in a bad way. And so I'm curious with that, what is it like covering the team as a fan? I've done it with the Patriots. Sometimes it almost feels like people want the clickbait and they, or at least outlets want the clickbait. They want things that's going to, bad things sell, stuff like that. But do you find it difficult? Do you find it more fun covering the team as a fan? And do you feel like you have to sort of, is it hard to, I guess, be biased in your coverage? Because I've found towing that line to be kind of difficult as well.
Yeah, I would say it's there's moments where it was a little bit challenging, but I'm not afraid to criticize the team. Like I'm trying to think. I was in Atlanta and they lost both of those games, and one of the games they blew like a 30-point lead, and the other one they lost. Like there were two close losses, and both times they looked terrible down the stretch. And we did our CLNS like post game hits, and there was nothing positive to say about how they looked down the stretch. Like they looked terrible, right? So I think that's fine to say. The things that I take issue with the way that sports is coverage is one, when it extends off the court, like when all of a sudden someone is weak or someone is lacks guts or things like that, where it's like it's so the jump from criticizing like the execution of a play to someone's character, to me, is just astounding. Like it's so quick. And that's the biggest thing that I think sports media needs to be careful about, and especially like the national level, like all the talk shows. It's a lot of times it's like not about the player's skills. You very rarely are getting into the weeds of like, this is the nuance of what Jaylen Brown needs to get better at. It's like, he doesn't have it. Like, what does that mean? He doesn't have it. But that's the way that we talk about sports. And that's what I have an issue with, is when you're starting to lump someone into this broader thing of like who they are as a person and not how they played last night, right? Like you can criticize how someone played last night without also indicting who they are as a player. And the biggest thing that I saw this year, and again, I know that it's my first year doing this. I'm sure that people that are older on the beat or people that are older covering sports have heard me talk about this, because I've talked about this incessantly this year. And I'm sure they're like, wait till she's, 5 years from now and she sees like losing seasons and things.
Yeah.
I found a frustration with when someone is going through a slump that we now have to like indict them as a person. Like Al Horford was struggling a lot earlier in the playoffs, and everything, all the questions, all the articles, there was so much discussion around like Al Horford he's just too old. Like he's just not going to make it. And I played basketball my whole life. Like I've gone through slumps where like I can't hit the rim for like a week, and I wasn't too old. I was 19. Right. So like, I think there's this desire to like make everything a story of like this person is struggling because of X. And like, what does this mean? Where like 95% of the time they're just struggling because it's basketball, and like you struggle for stretches, right? Like Sam Hauser couldn't hit anything in the conference finals. He shot like 60% from three, right? Like Jason Tatum, everybody went on to talk about a shooting struggle so much when like that was pretty much the only negative thing that was happening on the court for the Celtics during the playoffs. Mm-hmm. So to me, it's like they weren't losing and he was still really effective. So like it's not much of a story, right? It's a story if like they can't win a game now because he can't shoot, or we know why he's struggling, and I don't know. I just felt like there's still a desire, and not so much the Celtics beat, but just I guess more nationally, and I guess at times it goes local. But yeah, I don't really get it. I don't really think it's that accurate. And again, if I was covering a team that was bad, which there were many teams like that this year, then you have to figure out a different way to cover it, and how do you talk about it, and what's the story there. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure it's a completely different mindset. But for this team, I felt like there was no shortage of positive stories, and I felt like we left a lot of them on the table too, which like there were so many things I wanted to cover that I didn't get to. That to find time to talk about like the negative stuff just felt like unwarranted, I guess.
No, it's true, and it's even with the Celtics team, like there really was nothing, and so like you're just kind of, and JJ Redick said it yesterday in his Lakers press conference, like it's all engagement farming, and you're just trying to find and make stories out of nothing. And he was like, I'm not doing podcasts anymore, and he said that he didn't even say he worked in media, he worked in the engagement farming world. So I thought that was a good way to put it. So what has been your like so. You've podcasted, you've written, you've done your live from the NBA Finals series, but just all that stuff. But also in general, what is like the your absolute favorite part of working in the sports media industry?
Yeah, so I would say honestly, probably the people, and that's like probably not what I would have guessed, but just like on the day-to-day level, if I didn't like the people I was working with, then the whole thing would be a lot less fun, like traveling and going to games and things. And if you're sitting there by yourself, or I think that would on a day-to-day level, that would had a huge influence on my experience, especially having come from pretty much working remote and working in a very insular space. Like I don't really work that closely with my coworkers. It's a very kind of one-person job, so it's been that's been really awesome. And then just like I love basketball, and I love watching basketball and talking about basketball and writing about it, and I've always felt like a little, not like guilty, but a little bit like, I've been sitting on the couch watching this game for like 3 hours, or like I've been on Twitter scrolling through, or like reading. I've read every single Celtics article about last night's game. Like it just feels like kind of like a guilty pleasure. And now I don't feel guilty about it anymore because now it's like productive, right? So I think just being able to make that swap has felt really good, that I can be like, oh, I'm watching this game, but it's like for work, like I have to, or like I'm out here, I'm on the basketball reference, but it's not just because I'm like curious, like I'm actually like doing something productive with it. And then obviously like the championship run to me is like a something I'll never experience again, even if they win again. Like the way that happened and the way that it was my first season, and I loved this team. I thought the players were just awesome to watch from a basketball standpoint. They were great to interact with, and being able to watch the whole thing from the beginning of the season to the championship on my first year ever. I really couldn't have asked for a better storyline. And then just the last thing I would say is just like I never was someone that got starstruck by people. Like it was one of those things where I never really understood it, which is part of why I don't get why anybody would come up to me and ask me for a photo, but I do appreciate it. But so it's being able to meet the players on a personal level, and like some of them I feel like you don't really get to know at all because there's a wall in between them and the media, which I totally get. But others I did not feel the way. Like Xavier Tillman was one who I felt like would just talk to the media like a normal person. Like there was not really a big barrier there. And that's just so cool to be able to form a regular relationship with these players, and they say hi to you and you chat with them, and then you get to watch them succeed at the thing you love the most in the world. Like that part was awesome as well.
So and I always preface this question with, it's the dream job. You mentioned you've wanted to do it since you were 13. So like to complain about it sometimes is silly, but what's one thing that stinks? Like what's the least favorite part where sometimes it's like just kind of a pain in the ass? Like you know, whether you don't want to do it or whatever, like what's the least favorite part of working in the industry?
Honestly, right now, like I don't really have one. I think the thing that it would be my least favorite part is seeing how difficult it is for my coworkers and for other people on the beat. Like it's the pay, the instability, the fact that I feel like if I open Twitter, people are getting laid off, and like what you experience, like that, like it's not, I haven't experienced it yet because I also don't have a full-time job in this space, but I do feel like the closer I've got into this industry, the more I understand the advice of the people that told me not to do it, as much as I've loved it. Just being immersed in it, like I get why people were like, be careful, because it is really tough. And so I think, I worry about what it would look like doing it, more full-time down the road, just because I've seen the challenges. And I think people that I get so many people DM me asking me for advice, being like, how can I make a full living off of this? And it's like, I'm not making a living off of this right now. Like my living is off of my lobbying job, and I'm making, extra cash doing this. But I think people are surprised when they talk to me that they find that out. I think they think that because I get a lot of likes on my tweets that I'm like making a lot of money. I'm really not, right? So that's, I guess it hasn't been a problem for me, and I don't care about the money right now, but it definitely has created, like it's given me an understanding of like just how difficult it is to make it. But as far as the day to day, like if there was an optional shoot around, I was like, I'm so excited to go. Like it never got to the point of like, oh, I don't feel like going to that, or that's a waste of time, or this is boring, or they're not giving us any good quotes. Like to me, every single time that we get to go to the Auerbach Center, it's like a pinch me moment of like, I can't believe I get to walk in here. I've driven past here so many times. And I'm sure that'll wear off. I hope it doesn't for a long time, but like we have Brad Stevens talking today, and I thought that we were going to go back until training camp. And so I'm so excited to just like go, even though it's going to be like 5 minutes of probably nothing, and there's going to be 100 of us crammed around him. But like, I just think that'll be awesome. So I think that part has been kind of the main thing that I've enjoyed, is just being everywhere and being around it.
That's awesome. So you mentioned then the full-time work, the part-time work. Don't know if you want to make not that you don't know if you want to make the jump, but I wrap these up before we get into our fast 5 questions to finish with. What do you think's next for Noa Dalzell? And not that you're gonna all of a sudden just jump ship and quit your lobbying job and go full-time, but like what's next? What's the goal here? Do you think you'll ever, is the goal, I guess, to jump full-time into the space at some point? So yeah, what do you think is next for you?
Yeah, I think eventually, yes. I just feel like when I'm around this space, then and this industry, I just feel like it's right for me. It's like where I was supposed to be. I do really like my other job as well. So it's not like, I know a lot of people have had the description of like, I hated my job and then I was coming to TD Garden. Like that's not my experience at all. I really like both. But I think eventually that I would imagine that that's what would happen. But the main thing for me is that I right now I'm writing and doing stuff for like 9 websites. Like I'm doing a lot
Yeah,
of different things. I think it'd be great to be able to like consolidate that a little bit, just so I'm not stretched so thin. And
totally.
so that's like something that I've been thinking about. And then also, um, just in general, like I definitely want to start a podcast. That's something that I've been thinking about, trying to figure out where that would be housed, if it would be an independent thing or if it would be with an outlet.
Yeah.
So I think like short term, that's what I'm thinking about. I would have never guessed I wanted to podcast when I started this a year ago because I was always just someone that wrote.
Mhm.
But then I started going on as a guest and I was like, actually really like this. And then did my YouTube show and that was really fun because I really like talking. So I was like, I get to just talk for 30 minutes straight and it's not
Right.
like rude because it's just my show. So yeah, I think the podcast is kind of my next short-term thing. And then there's some like longer form pieces that I look forward to doing over the summer. But I really want to stay local as far as like the scope of my coverage for the
Yeah.
most part, because part of, again, like what I said, like about the being a part of the Boston community, like that's been the thing that I've loved the most probably, is being able to be like at Celtics games and knowing the fans and all that. And so would love to like this is year one. I'd love to like have that be times 10 in 5 years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's been what I've really enjoyed. I know a lot of people have like bigger aspirations as far as like broader coverage, things like that. Like I really love like this organization and covering like this city.
I feel you. I'm with you. I feel that way with Patriots too. Like I don't really care about going national. I grew up here. I want to cover the teams that I grew up rooting for. So, all right. Well, before we get you out of here, fast five to finish. Five fast rapid fire questions. Number one, Noah, what is your favorite thing to do outside of covering sports?
I would say probably going out to restaurants with my friends. I love going out to eat. Yeah.
Love it. Okay. Number two, I guess this one's probably going to be pretty obvious, but what has been your most memorable moment covering sports?
I would say the night they won the championship, later that night, Jaylen Brown came back with his finals MVP trophy at like 6 a.m. after being out, like before he went to Encore, and was just like watching the reporters play basketball. And it was just like such a crazy, cool moment
Yeah.
where that was the one time where I was like, I cannot believe this is like the same guy that just won a finals MVP. Now he's just like chilling here with us. And I'm at TD Garden and there's confetti everywhere. And we're about to record like a show about this game. Like, I think that in that moment, it kind of all hit me of how cool this was. And the championship was really cool, but we were also like trying to run downstairs and like, there was a lot of logistical things to worry about. But at that point, there was like no more coverage things to think about. It was just like soaking it all in.
So I saw that with you guys. I saw like Amit with the trophy, with Jalen's trophy and stuff like that. Was he literally just like hanging out with you guys, like talking? Like I'm curious.
Yeah,
that's cool.
He was like just like chilling with us. And I mean, he wasn't saying like I honestly was like, I don't want to be a reporter at all. I don't want to be annoying to him. I don't even want to like talk to him. But his trophy, his friend or family member, I'm not sure, but had his finals MVP trophy, and like they couldn't have acted like it was a less important thing. Like the thing was being passed around, everybody's taking photos. They didn't even like look at it. So
that's so funny.
Yeah, Amit took a photo. A bunch of people did.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really cool, and he like took a couple shots, didn't miss any. The thing that stuck with me is that he kept repeating what a beautiful sight and watching us play and watching everybody play. And so I thought that was cool. Like it was just clear how much he loves basketball. And he was like kind of like, oh, you guys like basketball too? Or there was a lot of like, it was a really just cool moment.
That's awesome. All right, number three. What is the best piece of advice you've received while working in the sports media industry?
Ooh, I've gotten a lot of really good advice. I think maybe Bobby Manning gave me a really good piece of advice. Like, I don't even know if you remember this. It was like before I even met him in person, I reached out to him and we did like a Google Meets call. He said, like, as far as your Twitter, like just start acting as like just start tweeting about the Celtics, like everything you can find, everything you know, just like basically become the authority if you want.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking like at the time I didn't know how to, like I knew I was following everything and I knew everything that was going on, but I didn't know like why should I share it out? But he kind of was just like, just do it basically.
Yeah.
And then anybody that follows me know I've taken that maybe too far, but I think like that was a really good piece of advice as far as just as far as like building an audience, I guess, and like kind of establishing your legitimacy as like a Celtics person.
Yep, for sure. All right, number four. What would you? I guess this one's tough too. But what would you be doing if you weren't working in sports media? Now I know you also have your full-time job in policy.
Yeah.
But, what I guess we'll take those two out of it then. What else?
Can't do
what else?
either of them. Okay.
Yeah, you can't do either. Where would your career be going?
That's a good question. So I guess this is kind of in the weeds, but like I'm like a policy person, so I like lobby for legislation, and I kind of hate politics, honestly. So hopefully nobody listens to this
Everybody
podcast.
hates politics in this world. Don't
Yeah.
worry.
So I think it would be like the work that I'm doing for my full-time job, like I'm advocating for like more sustainable foods, but not through a policy lens. Like I'd be like working with like schools to try to get like more plant-based meals for like kids, like really directly like with the sources, which is what I think I'll eventually do in some form. But so still like what I do for my full-time job, but like more just like working with people like in the community. I really like being like in the community. That's like a big thing
Yeah,
for me.
I can
So
tell,
I think figuring out like how to do kind of like mix the two things, because politics, you don't feel like you're a part of anything nice.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Well, I don't know how well number 5 is gonna go then, because with your vegan. But what's your favorite pizza? What's your favorite pizza topping? Are you allowed to
I
eat
love
pizza?
People
Okay,
don't know
perfect.
this.
Okay.
People don't realize that pizza does not have to have cheese on it. Actually, most
Okay.
people, like, so I when I'm traveling, like for either of my jobs, like at 2 a.m, if you land somewhere, like limited food options, right? So the hack that I have is Papa John's pizza. They make pizza, just no cheese, and then you just have sauce and vegetables. And people think that's gonna sound like lacking flavor, but everybody that's ever tried it has been like, this is actually almost better because it's like a little bit lighter, but it still has like all the flavor and things. So just a veggie pizza, tomato sauce, so good. Everybody would like it if they tried it. That's my thing that I always say. It sounds weird, but it's really so good.
That
So
does.
I eat it all the time, like way more than I probably should. But yeah, it's a good late night hack.
Yeah, good. That's awesome. I'm glad we could wrap those two together, vegan and pizza. So that's it for episode 11. Noah, thank you so much for joining me. Super cool story. So if you haven't already, go follow Noah on Twitter. Again, Noah, thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right. You can follow us on Twitter at Behind Mike Pod and on Instagram at Behind Mike Pod. That's it for episode 11 with Noa Dalzell. Until next time, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.